Continuing on with this story, Chapter 3, Fixing Forest Fairy Problems. After Mariah, Allison, and Brittany had stepped through the portal, they found themselves in a very green forest with colorful flowers everywhere they looked. Although the many overhead branches blocked out most of the sunlight, leaving them in a brown shadow, the air was warm. All around them they saw what at first they mistook for fireflies, but then they realized that the little orbs were too big to be fireflies because each one was the size of Mariah's hand. Then they noticed a guy leaning against a tree nearby watching them. He looked like Josh, but with blonde hair and a beard. "Hey," he said when he saw that they had noticed him. "Hi," they replied. "Who are you?" Mariah asked. "The name's Gabe," the man replied. "I've been waiting for you." "Okay," Allison said, waiting for him to elaborate. Gabe stood up away from the tree that he had been leaning on and walked to a beautiful white rose-covered arbor nearby which they had not noticed until now. "Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to save the fairy people from the wasps that are threatening them with extinction," Gabe continued. "The wasps have taken over the territory next to the river, cutting them off from their water supply. They are in desperation. If you will walk through this arbor, you will become like them so that you can cooperate with them in this endeavor." "You can't be serious," Brittany responded. "Oh, but I am," Gabe replied. "Also, you have a new friend here who will go with you and help you. You can call him Perry." Here he indicated with a wave of his hand a person standing next to him that they could barely see due to his translucent nature and the shadows of the forest. "Hey, it's a pleasure to meet you," Perry said when he saw that they now saw him. "Same," the girls responded. "So, are you all up for this?" Gabe asked. The girls looked at each other and shrugged. "We've come this far. Why not?" Mariah answered for all of them. "Okay, then. Perry will go through the arbor first so you can see how it works," Gabe said. Perry stepped forward and walked through the arbor. At first it looked like he had just disappeared, but then Gabe pointed him out to them. He had become like the orbs they had seen when they first came, and was floating up to their eye level. "Who's next?" Gabe wondered aloud. "I will," said Mariah, and she walked through the arbor, instantly becoming a small orb of light to the other girls. But she could now see that she was an airy, nimble little fairy with dragonfly wings. Right away she wanted to try her wings, so she flew up to where Perry waited for her. He also had dragonfly wings which fluttered lightly as he hovered there. Next, Allison and finally Brittany walked through and experienced the same transformation. For a couple of minutes they all hovered together in a group, looking around. Soon they noticed that the orbs they had seen earlier were all converging into one group off to the right and ahead of them. They decided to follow at a distance to see if they could find the fairy village that way. Sure enough, the group of orbs led them to a little clearing full of beautiful, colorful, ornate little houses. Unsure what to do, the girls lingered just above the undergrowth on the edge of the clearing. Suddenly they were aware that they were not alone. They looked over to their left, and there, not too far away, was a handsome, dark-haired guy fairy, hovering and looking over the village as they were. He looked over at them, smiled and winked, and started to fly away. Brittany was overwhelmed with his dashing good looks and followed him, saying, "Hey, wait up." He turned and waited briefly until she caught up. Then he took her hand and flew off on whatever unknown mission he was on. Mariah and Allison were terrified for Brittany because they had a bad feeling about that handsome fairy guy. They looked at Perry with wide eyes, and Perry sensed the questions in their minds. "Yes, you are right," Perry answered. "That boy is up to no good. His name is Gadrell, and he works for Lukey." "Who is Lukey?" Mariah and Allison asked in unison. "Someone who wants to kill you as well as destroy the fairy people," Perry responded. "Oh my God," gasped Allison. "What are we going to do?" "For right now, we're going to continue on our mission," Perry answered. "Brittany is not yet ready to be rescued. She is too far under his spell already." As they turned their eyes back to the village before them, they now noticed that the group that they had followed here had not gone into their homes yet. They stood in smaller groups here and there, talking with other villagers that had stayed in the village when they had gone out. Mariah's eyes were drawn to the small group standing closest to them. "Come on," she said. "Let's go see if we can find out anything." They flew down to the group, who looked up at them as they approached. "Hi," Mariah greeted them. "I'm Mariah, and this is Allison. We heard that you guys were having some troubles, and we are hoping that maybe we can help." Can you tell us what is happening? The fairies in the group looked uncertainly at each other, but one looked at them and they could tell that he could see Perry. It's okay, this young man told the others. Perry is with them. The group sighed with relief while the young man started to talk to Mariah and Allison. Mariah thought he was very hot. My name is Elijah, the guy began. Just the other day, some of our people were down at the river getting water, just like we do every day, when they were attacked by a band of wasps. Many of them were stung and died. We believe that Lukey or some of his helpers planted their nest there by our river to cut us off from our water supply. Excuse me. We saw one of Lukey's helpers just before we came into your village, Allison said, still worried about Brittany. Our friend fell under his spell and went off somewhere with him. Oh dear, said a motherly-looking villager from the group. That is very bad. Yes, Mariah said, but Perry said that we need to stay focused on our mission to help you get rid of the wasps for right now. Here's my idea. Wasps all go into their nests to rest at night and are dormant all night. Can we get a torch, take some fire to the nest at night and put it down into the nest? Catch the nest on fire and kill all the wasps that way? We might have to have people all around with buckets of water to make a circle of wetness to keep the fire from spreading to things we don't want to burn, though. A bold plan, Elijah said approvingly. If all goes well, it may work. Let's go suggest it to my father. The motherly villager whispered to the girls that Elijah's father was the king of their people. Suddenly the girls felt shyer towards Elijah, but he had already decided that they were his friends, so it didn't matter. He was already leading them, along with the group, to the palace in the center of the village. Soon they came to huge golden gates, with guards standing watch in front of them. The guards saw Elijah and opened the gates for him and his friends. As they entered the courtyard, Mariah and Allison looked in awe at the white and green streaked marble pavements and golden flower-shaped fountains surrounded by colorful flower bushes on every side. Before they knew it, they were entering the coolness of an elegant palace room with marble columns and windows framed with purple velvet curtains. Room after room of elegance and beautiful wealth followed, until finally they came to the grand throne room, which was full of the king's advisors and servants. Elijah led them up the velvet red carpet to speak right to the king. On a throne next to the king sat the beautiful, stately queen, while two other handsome boys who looked similar to Elijah stood near the king. The girls guessed rightly that the boys were Elijah's brothers. Elijah greeted his family, introducing the girls to them. His brothers' names were Abijah and Ahijah. Then he invited Mariah to tell her plan to the king. After she explained it, the king looked thoughtful. "It is a bit dangerous and risky," he said pensively, "but we have not thought of anything better, and it seems likely to work." After a thoughtful pause, the king decreed, "We will try this young lady's plan." He then began to give instructions for various servants to gather supplies and rally the people necessary. "Who is bold enough to be the one to drop the fire into the entrance of the wasp's nest?" the king asked. "We will have 3 or 4 people with torches as backup in case anything goes wrong with the first attempts." "We came here to help you guys," Allison said. "Yeah," Mariah said, "we want to be the people with the torches who drop them into the nest." "Wow, intelligence and courage," the king marveled. "You 2 girls are people of quality. You must be royalty also in the place you come from." The girls didn't really know what to say to that, but it was okay because everyone was suddenly busy with the arrangements. That night, with the falling of darkness, all was ready for the planned venture. Mariah and Allison stood in a group of 5 people holding torches, the other 3 being Elijah and his brothers. A crowd of fairy villagers stood around them, holding buckets. They would fill them at the river once they got there, then come to stand around the torch people, ready to dump the water as soon as the nest caught fire. Between the water holders and the torch holders, soldiers would stand with their swords drawn in case any wasps might wake up enough to come out to attack them. Quietly, the whole group made the journey to the wasp nest, and the bucket holders filled their buckets as quickly and quietly as they could. Then the group moved to the entrance of the nest, and everyone got in their positions. Holding her torch up, Mariah looked down into the hole. A guard wasp was resting near the entrance. Mariah drew her breath in at how big the wasp was compared to her size as a fairy. It was the size that a medium-sized dog was to her human self. No wonder the fairy people died when they were stung. The guard wasp stirred, waking up at the light of the torch. Oh, crap, Mariah thought. Quickly she dropped the torch into the hole, but the breeze created by its fall reduced the torch to an ember. Mariah jumped back because she knew the guard wasp would be angered and alerted and be upon them soon. "It went out," she whispered frantically. The wasp popped out of the hole looking for a victim. Someone threw their bucket of water on it, which slowed it down enough for a soldier to step forward and slice through its slender middle. The bottom of the wasp with its deadly stinger fell back into the hole, while its top continued to fly. The soldier frantically slashed the rest of the wasp up into pieces which dropped to the ground all around. Suddenly they felt and heard a buzzing sound coming from the nest underneath their feet, gradually getting louder. The water had seeped into the nest, awakening a few of the wasps, who awakened the others. "Quick," Elijah whispered loudly. "Put all the torches together over the hole to block the entrance." The other 4 torch holders jumped to the hole and touched the tops of their torches together over the hole, hoping like everything that it would actually stop the wasps from being able to sting them. The soldiers stood alert and ready to fight any that might get through. The grass around the hole began to catch fire, so the torch holders let go of the torches and stepped behind the line of soldiers who were ready to step away from the fire if it got too close. The torches fell together in one big flame into the hole. Stepping back, the whole crowd waited in suspense, holding their breath to see what would happen now. The buzzing rose to a crescendo and then began to die down. By now, though, the fire had spread more than they had intended it to. Suddenly, the bucket holders realized this and frantically emptied their buckets, rushing back to the river to fill them again because their circle was now bigger than they had planned for it to be, and there were gaps in the water circle. The fire was beginning to escape containment. "Why didn't I think to bring shovels, too?" Mariah berated herself out loud. "We could have dug a trench also to help contain the fire." Elijah heard her and sent some servants to get shovels. In the midst of the frantic activity over the fire, suddenly they heard someone screaming and screaming. "Brittany!" shouted Allison, recognizing the voice. "Where are you?" Brittany continued to scream, so they followed the sound of her voice and soon realized that she was in the midst of the burning grass somewhere. Between the fire and the darkness of night and the smoke, they couldn't tell where she was. "Perry, quick!" Mariah yelled. "Help us find Brittany!" Perry pointed to a spot somewhat near the hole of the wasp's nest. Mariah and Allison squinted and could just make out the shadow of a struggling figure lying on the ground in the midst of all the fires. "Bucket holders," Allison shouted. "Please try to make us a path to her in the fire." Water came from every direction, splashing in front of them as far as they could get in one round of water. The bucket holders rushed back to the river for more water. Meanwhile, Mariah and Allison jumped into the air and flew as close to the ground as they could, trying to avoid breathing in the smoke, towards Brittany. The heat was nearly unbearable. Finally, they reached Brittany, each grabbing onto an arm, and struggled to lift her out of the fire. Elijah, Abijah, and Ahijah were right on their heels, arriving in time to add their strength to pulling Brittany out of the fire to the river. There they dipped her in the water to put out the fire on her, realizing in the process that she was bound hand and foot. Gently they dropped her on the river bank. Then they all collapsed beside her, coughing from all the smoke they had inhaled. After a moment, Ahijah pulled out his dagger and cut the ropes that Brittany had been tied up in, while Abijah called some servants over and sent them to get a salve for her burns. Brittany sat there sobbing in relief and in pain, while Mariah and Allison tried to comfort her. "It was that nasty guy that works for Lukey that did this to you, wasn't it?" Mariah said. "I don't know who Lukey is," Brittany said, "but yeah, that hot guy that we saw by the village when we first got there tied me up and left me by the wasp's nest so they would kill me in the morning. He is pure evil. Who knew?" Mariah and Allison looked at each other and decided not to tell her who knew. "You just need to be more careful about who you trust," Allison said gently. "Good looks does not equal good heart." "Well, we'd love to stay and chat," Elijah said, "but we've got a fire to put out." After the boys flew off to direct the firefighting efforts, the servants with the salve and bandages came and took care of Brittany's burns. Within an hour or two, the group, plus more of the village people who had been called out to help and bring more supplies, had gotten the fire all put out. Leaving a small group to watch the area and make sure no fires came back to life during the night, the rest of them headed back to the village to sleep and recover from their hard night's work. On the way back, Elijah flew with Mariah, holding her hand and chatting amiably with her. Abijah flew with Allison, doing the same, and Ahijah walked with Brittany because her wings had been damaged in the fire. At the palace, the girls were shown 2 beautiful, luxurious rooms with big, soft beds where they exhaustedly fell right to sleep. Oh, it's 15 minutes. Okay, we'll have to finish the rest later.